The MCU is inching close to becoming 20 years old, which is insane. And with that amount of time, there have been so many tales sprawling across this still ever-growing universe. But there are also many tales that haven't had the chance to see the light of day. Some for the better, and maybe some, like the cancelled Office-style sitcom set in the world of the Avengers, that actually could have been a great benefit to expanding the universe's ever-evolving storylines. This is the tale of Marvel's Damage Control. The organization Damage Control is probably one you've heard of because they made their first MCU appearance in Spider-Man Homecoming, followed by appearances in Spider-Man Far From Home, She-Hulk, and Ms. Marvel. But before its big debut, it was originally mentioned all the way back in the very beginning of the MCU in Iron Man, getting referenced by Coulson at the end of the film extremely briefly. Then years later, it got a very important reference in Season 3, Episode 14 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., titled Watch Dogs. In the episode, a shootout takes place at a house, and Daisy Johnson mentions that Damage Control is on their way to clean up the mess. This was especially paramount because this was the setup to get people ready for the standalone Damage Control series. And on October 2nd of 2015, it was announced by Deadline that ABC had ordered a pilot into production, with the hopes of airing the show in fall of 2016. The showrunner, Ben Carlin, who actually pitched it to ABC, and head of Marvel TV at the time, Jeff Loeb, would write the pilot episode, with the show's official synopsis being, Marvel's Damage Control centers on the overworked and underpaid cleanup crew of the Marvel Universe. Their specialty is dealing with the aftermath of the unique fallout from superhero conflicts, like returning lost ray guns to their rightful owners, rescheduling a wedding venue after it's been vaporized in a battle, or even tracking down a missing prize African parrot that's been turned to stone or goo. Sometimes the most important heroes are the ones behind the scenes. It was going to be established as a single camera, half-hour sitcom in the tone of The Office and Parks and Rec, really leaning into the absurdity of the daily goings-on of the MCU. Even getting a producer from Parks and Rec to help executive produce the series, with the aforementioned Ben Carlin steering the ship, someone who at the time had worked on The Daily Show, The Colbert Report, and more famously, Modern Family, and has over his television career won an astonishing 14 Emmys. It was safe to say that the show was in great hands, with comments from the head of ABC television at the time, Paul Lee, discussing in interviews about the show's progress in 2016, stating, "That's the one that's gonna be coming out this season. I haven't read it yet. I can't wait to see it. We hope it's gonna be great." But even though the show got into the production stage of a pilot episode, which is basically a test episode the TV network pays for, to see if the show can move on to a full season. Unfortunately, after Carlin wrote the script, ABC ended up not moving forward, going as far as to not even film the pilot episode. So, no casting, series writers, directors, or other plot lines beyond the ones mentioned in the synopsis ever got announced, or even close to making it into a reality, with the script of the pilot episode never leaking. But some trade insiders and fans have speculated that the first episode most likely surrounded a new hire coming in on their first day and learning how to navigate this crazy career. Pretty straightforward for a show like this, and I 100% believe that's what it was. With the only real last two pieces of information we know about the series overall is that because it was airing on ABC, the channel that showcased Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., there was speculation of some sort of crossover between the two series. And secondly, it's never been confirmed if the show was going to follow under the leadership change from S.H.I.E.L.D. to Tony Stark. Which leads me to why the show was most likely cancelled. There's never been a definitive reason behind why the show got axed. In fact, besides one interview with Jeff Loeb and the already mentioned anecdote from ABC president Paul Lee, the show has never been mentioned again from anyone involved. Even Carlin, the showrunner, has never mentioned it either. It's as if the show was never intended to be made in the first place. No one has ever talked about it after the initial announcement. But here's my theory for why the show got canceled. At the time, Marvel Studios and Marvel TV were two separate companies working under the same boss, Marvel Entertainment. But in August of 2015, Marvel Studios, headed by Kevin Feige, asked Bob Iger, head of Walt Disney, to separate themselves from Marvel Entertainment due to constant creative clashes. Iger obliged, and after filming wrapped on Captain America Civil War, Marvel Entertainment had no control over the movie side of the company anymore. It was solely Feige. Which is why, once you start the first Doctor Strange, the Marvel logo at the beginning of the movie changed to the one we know now. It was signaling to the audience that there was a difference in Marvel branded content, but Marvel TV was still under the control of Marvel Entertainment. Feige had no authority on what was going on over there, and yet Marvel Entertainment kept putting their shows in Feige's MCU. And Damage Control wasn't gonna be an exception. But here's the thing. After Civil War came out and Tom Holland's Spider-Man was introduced, Marvel and Sony wanted to get into production as soon as possible to get their first MCU Spidey film out to theaters the following year. Now, in order to do that, Marvel and Sony got into pre-production for Homecoming in January of 2016, which is when the script process also began. And if you were paying attention earlier to when pre-production on the Damage Control pilot began, Homecoming's pre-production would have started only 3 months after this announcement. Even though Marvel Studios and Marvel TV were completely separate at this time, they were both under Disney, so information could easily still get around on what each side was up to in their creative endeavors. So what most likely happened is that Marvel TV got a hold of the information that Feige was now taking over on properly introducing the Damage Control organization in the upcoming Spider-Man movie. Okay, so what's the big deal with that? It would be nice corporate synergy, right? Yeah, it would, if the two were working together. As already stated, Marvel Entertainment and Marvel Studios had major issues with each other, and before the split, Feige had to report planned narratives of the movies to Marvel TV, so that they could connect the shows to the movie's continuity. But now that they were completely separate, Feige refused to do that. So all Marvel TV probably knew was that Damage Control was going to be a major part of the new Spidey movie, but they had no idea how. And they weren't gonna find out until the movie itself was released. And since they planned to use the MCU as its setting, they would have to know these things. But Feige was not going to lend a hand to them. Thus, ending my theory with Marvel TV deciding to axe the project in order to not confuse their audiences with their interpretation of Damage Control, which would have been completely different from the one we saw in Homecoming, which most likely wouldn't have had Tony Stark be the new head of it. With all that said, I think this was an exceptional idea for a show, and I think it could still be done. And honestly, even better than the originally planned version. Because as of 2019, Kevin Feige now controls Marvel TV too, with Marvel Entertainment being a thing of the past. No more split down the middle company. Feige is in charge of it all. And he's already made Damage Control a part of 2 shows' plotlines with She-Hulk and Ms. Marvel. And if they ever decided to one day move forward in making the show a reality, we could actually see our beloved heroes show up in the series, which we never would have gotten with the original version. So here's to a hopeful future where the MCU could make this idea come true, and tell the story about the little guys that populate their universe. Because everyone's story is important, no matter how big or small.